Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I am excited to be here. I haven't been here in quite some time, so I've been looking forward to this meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order in recognition of a quorum at 6:10. Mrs. Dryden?
Present. Present.
Mr. Sullivan?
Present.
Dr. Camby is absent. Ms. Hutt is also absent. Dr. Ramirez?
Present.
Ms. Peterson?
Present.
And Mrs. Torres. Great. We have a quorum.
Yeah, just as an item, Ms. Hupp said that she would be attending, that she'll be late.
Okay, and I believe Dr. Camby will also be slightly late. Is there a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Any discussion?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-0, 2 absences. Do we have any comments from the public? Okay, at this time, we will go ahead and go to closed session. It's about 6:10, and we should be returning at about 6:45. All right. We adjourn from closed session at 6:30. It is now 6:33. No action taken. We'll go ahead and stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Right hand over your heart, face the flag, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Bless you. Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0, 1 absent. Do we have an audience to address the board? Okay. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
All right, well, good evening, trustees. It's great to see all of you. This month's board presentation really, or sorry, superintendent's report really focuses on just the start of the year. Many good things to share on that front. So we'll start with our opening. I want to just continue to thank everybody who's been so supportive over the course of the last several weeks since we opened the school year. Just this past week, we held our first of two back to school nights. We'll be hosting our next one here in 2 days on Thursday. And, a really good turnout for us, a really good, we attempted a few things that are a little different than in past years or in prior years, including having and hosting a community fair, which involved bringing on partners to basically table out in front of the school and provide supports. In particular, all of them were great, but I really want to clue in on our library system being out here to provide information to our families as we look to broaden our scope and our reach around literacy. But the Truth of the County of Ventura was here, providing resources and information. Women in History, Boy Scouts were here as well. And we expect all of them back here on Thursday with the addition of Girl Scouts as well. So just very thankful. First and foremost, it was something new, but it was something that appeared to be very well received. As far as the content of those presentations, something also that we've been doing over the last several years is focusing as a grade level cohort, and so teachers coming together to put those presentations forward to families. And this year, we highlighted a number of things, but a few in particular. Our onboarding of Avid, that's something that has really gotten us off to a solid start to the year, and teachers spoke to that quite a bit. Counseling, our counselor, and social emotional services, which we'll talk more about later, and that continued push for extracurriculars and additional activities that help engage students, including our capstone, if you will, trips both to Simi and to Poway in 6th and 7th grade respectively. So just more than anything else, it was a great opportunity to come together, to build community, and obviously to get to know staff, particularly with so many of our families being longstanding. It's just an opportunity to meet one another and to meet a new staff. Okay. Moving forward, I wanted to try something a little different with this particular part of the presentation. I wanted to bring forward a highlight, an important highlight from our instructional program, something that I'm very proud of, and that has come together very nicely to start the year. And we're hoping just continues to build from there. And that's our after-school program, our Full Steam Ahead. Over the last 2 years now, this one being the second, we've talked about the implementation of the framework for the future and the learner profile. And all along, we've known that that's a kind of a bigger, or it is a bigger plan, a horizon, if you will, that always was intended to be defined by our programs and more day to day. So I wanted to just spend a little time talking about our after-school program. There are many things, great things, wonderful things that the program has done over many years. And the last couple of years have been challenging for a number of reasons, not the least of which is just coming back post-pandemic to activities and functions that were, not always available to us. It took us a while to get back on track. But I feel like the start of this year has been a strong one, and only, I think, will continue to get better and better as the year goes along. So I just wanted to mention a couple of figures, a couple of numbers here. Our after-school program serves, Full Steam Ahead, serves grades K-8, and right now we have 94 students, which is a pretty significant percentage of our overall students. Our focus areas are really on learning acceleration. It is on the integration of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. But even above that, it's really about lengthening the day of students so that they can continue to be in a good setting, having more opportunities to be supported in their learning and in their socializing with other peers, building community. So there are grade and age span specific learning experiences that we have historically built, but that this year we're trying to take in even a different direction. And all the while, every year it's been a little bit more focused, and in this year we took, I think, another big step forward on focusing on our special populations, really targeting our students who we know could stand and benefit from that after school programming and that additional time with us. So with that said, coming back to that learning acceleration, we've got some really exciting shifting of practices and times that are starting to really give way. And all of that is really only possible because of the staffing and the personnel that we have on hand. So I'll start first with a new position that we created last year, board supported, and we were able to staff. Ms. Sarah Hokamp took that role as the after school and expanded learning specialist. She dove right in. All the way back to last spring, she was already getting to know the program. And through the summer, collaborating with several others, including Mrs. Oliveras, who has been a through line for many years in the program. And they really went to work and thinking boldly and broadly about what's possible for this year. And so they really took a look at additional instructional materials. They wanted some cohesive materials and cohesion across, but a lot of it was dedicated to that integration. And so far, we've gotten off to a good start. We also increased hours for personnel. We found in my discussions with and observations, we realized that sometimes the time just wasn't enough to really plan, develop the learning experiences that I know we all wanted. And so we did in several instances expand the number of hours to add components for prep and for collaboration and for even some things as simple as creating materials and putting everything together in advance. So I think that is all going to really, it's already started to show a more coherent and cohesive experience. And the other thing we're planning is an increased number of activities and partnerships. And that's going to really kick off with our Friday clubs and activities. Those are still coming together, but what we're targeting is Fridays being a time where kids can experience something a little different, things that are of interest to them, and they're also exposing them to things that they don't traditionally see during the school day. And in terms of activities, we want to continue to push ahead with certainly college going activities, things that put kids in the middle of college campuses so that they can really feel like that idea of being a college student is feasible and possible for them. So later this coming month, we're going to be going to UCLA, and the kids will be participating in a football game and having a tour of the campus. So that's just the starting point. We've got other activities and plans in wait, but I wanted to highlight this program because it's such a promising program for us. It always has been. And what we want to do is increase the level of intentionality, the level of alignment to what's happening during the school day, and really utilize it as an opportunity to accelerate learning. And there are a number of other ways that I can get into that we were already starting, which I'll discuss actually a little later. But for the time being, I just wanted to give a real broad overview. This staff has come together. Our after-school activities leaders have come together really, really nicely. And I think it's starting to show in terms of our routines and just our energy in receiving students and being more intentional with their time as well. So many more things to come. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We consolidated our space. So I think even just for supervision alone, that's been fantastic for direction with families and parents, just clarity. And it's helped us tremendously. So right now, these are just some pictures of the kids and some of the things they were doing. This is this is particular is the 4-5 group, which is over in the soon to be dubbed, but for now, STEAM Lab. And I'm just really excited that they really got off to a good, strong start. Just focusing on culture, focusing on expectations, focusing on strong routines so that they could carry us through the year. And so at this point, I just wanted to provide the board with that high level view of that program, which is very, very important. As you can see, 94 students. It's a significant number of our kids that are participating every day. So with that said, we're gonna, here's just some snapshots of the furniture as it's coming together. And hopefully even at the end of the meeting today, the board can take a look because I think this is gonna give us just another benefit in terms of the programming that we want to put together.
Question.
Sure.
You mentioned that the kids that attend STEAM, the purpose of it is for them to accelerate their learning, and which is great. So specifically, what do they do to accelerate their learning during STEAM?
Well, let me give you an example, and it's something that we had been talking about now for a bit of time. We started to reorient the way that time was used in that program. So previously, what we experienced, and I'll just give you a generic view, there was a homework hour or homework time, and then that followed by some STEAM activity, okay, some STEAM related activity. So right away, what we did this year is we flipped the order. We put homework at the tail end, knowing that sometimes schedules don't always align, and we wanted to make sure that our kids were consistently participating in those opportunities. Now, what happened recently was during that homework time specifically, starting with our lower grade, and we're going to be making our way up, we're breaking down that time into, so I'll tell you what's happening in first grade, to be very precise. That hour of time is being broken up into smaller increments of time. And what we are using is our Sunday system, our Sunday materials, which are very foundational or rooted in foundational literacy, and using the data that we already have on students to be able to give them more time on task. And so during their independent time, they're actually on Freckle either Math or Freckle ELA, which is an online program that allows them to receive support at their level, all with an eye toward just making that time very purposeful. So when we start to think and accrue the hours, right, if we're just talking about time, we're talking about anywhere between 4 and 5 additional hours of focused attention for small groups of students. And so we're working our way up from the lower grade up through all the way up to middle school. And so those rotations will obviously look different from middle school, but we want to make sure that we're being very, very proactive and very strategic in how we use their time.
So during the time that they are spending in STEAM, they do homework plus something else. How much time do they spend doing homework?
That depends on the average day and it depends on the average student. But we've got approximately an hour's worth of time. And of course, depending on the day, depending on the student, that may be more or less time than they need. So part of what we want to do is tailor it so that students have some choice, but that there's an opportunity to address some learning that may also be needed or required. And we started purposefully in the lower grade because that's where we know it's a more compliant, if you will, group. And so we wanted to start there, and we wanted to really think about cutting back time and splitting it in ways that are also better for them. An hour to a 6-year-old is very, 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 very difficult, right, to fill that time. And rather than having activities that are yes, pleasant, but maybe not as constructive. We wanted to now shift toward being very, very intentional. So a focus on literacy, a focus on numeracy, a focus on time. In addition to that, we're experimenting a little bit with some additional students helping us in those classrooms as well. I won't get into that too much, but it is something that will ultimately help us in terms of providing additional supports for our after-school program staff.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Is there any articulation between, the day, classroom during the day, the regular ed, and the after-school program? And how much homework are we loading up on the kids that are going to be here until after 5?
Yes. So there is, and it's been historical. It's not new. It's always been that way. What we want to do is make that even more intentional. And I'll talk later about what's going to give us visibility into that. But what I mentioned, for example, right now, that for a first grader is their morning block. That is mirroring their morning block. And you talked about articulation. Well, we have their data, right? We know where they are. And so this is allowing us to be able to group kids according to, like levels, and be able to be more targeted in terms of what we're presenting them with. So I guess to the core of your question, there has been articulation, but we want to make that a deeper, stronger articulation. And we want to make that increasingly an experience where kids are basically pulling in from the day and allowing their after school to benefit them, that following day as they go about their week.
Another question, the AVID system, I really like how the students are being so organized with the binders and the dividers. I've had to buy my son another binder, a heavy duty binder, because the first one that he was using was already kind of tearing apart. So what are we going to do with the students that have a very similar situation and perhaps cannot afford to buy another binder?
Get them another binder, and we'll get them another binder.
Okay, because
we've been in a position where, and I've had this conversation with staff. If a binder is an impediment between success or failure, that's not a hard sell. It's not a hard decision to make. Ultimately, yes, what we are talking about is responsibility. What we are trying to put forward with is how to equip students with self-organization. But depending on the student, that is something that either may or may not come as naturally to them, that may or may not have been reinforced. And so as those situations come up, and they will, oftentimes parents will take it upon themselves, as you may have. But for those instances, and this is where teachers knowing kids as well as they do always makes the difference, because they're constantly outreaching to us to make sure that though things of that nature aren't an impediment to student success. We've got plenty of other challenges. That shouldn't be one of them. And right now we're in a position to be able to take care of those basic needs. But to be fair about it, oftentimes it's parents who are jumping right in and stepping up. And I think to the point that you mentioned about organization, which is now part of just being a responsible, productive, successful student, the middle school staff, fifth grade teachers included, wanted to really get the year started on a very strong note. And they all, to a person, agreed that organization was their number one priority in getting a good, solid launch. And the other benefit of that is that it'll build year to year. So you're not teaching a new set of routines next year. You're basically just continuing them. So that's what the teachers are now anticipating. I couldn't be more proud of them for moving in this direction. And the other piece, which is just as impactful, if not more, is the focused note-taking. So that's starting to come together. The teachers just a week ago, Wednesday, did a deep dive into focused note-taking, taking into consideration their different disciplines, their different age groups, and also the fact that everything is new for a lot of students. While some of them have a lot of experience, some have none. And so we're trying to just moderate that and establish a a firm set of expectations.
The note taking, is it on paper or on their computer?
In many instances, it's both, although we are starting with print. We want to keep them organized, their table of contents, their folders and binders, specific sections. And so you'll see a lot of this in print. Like in science, for example, they're utilizing their recently adopted materials and just reformatting those, adding content in. So it looks a little different. It's mostly in print right now, but increasingly it'll edge into digital as well. We'll live in both spaces, in other words.
I have a couple more questions. It has to do with the after-school program. I noticed we got roughly 15–16% of the students that are participating in after-school. I hope that remains, but and it's a significant thing. I also looked at the beginning slide that talks about the demographics. What are the demographics are as broad as what's in the slide, saying that we've got special needs, low income, ESL versus, and those that don't need all those extra services. I'm wondering how much those could augment RSP and pull out, what's going on. Maybe I'm thinking too far.
Yeah, I think I'm tracking with your question. My point in identifying that group, those groups of students, is to suggest that we know that there are students that definitely benefit from, every student would benefit from additional time in an after-school program. The challenge for us is always capacity. How many students can we have in a grade level in order to make it productive for all students? And also, we do have a budget that has become much improved over the last several years, but it's still a budget. And so there's always this balance of who to target. And so we always are looking for opportunities to extend that to students that are in that need or in one of those populations where we know that additional time can serve them extremely well. Again, in terms of, any other programs or services that a student may be receiving, we want them to complement each other. We want them to augment, but we want to do it very strategically. You're going to hear me say that over and again today, because that's really what we're trying to do. We're not necessarily trying to build more. We're trying to build different. We're trying to build more intentionally, in a more focused, refined way. Because I think we've gotten to a point where we've got these programs launched. Now it's about, what are they yielding? What's the quality? What's the effort? What are we getting out of these? And I think that's where we currently sit with the number of things that we've got going on, the after school program included.
I love the whole organizing and how teachers are holding them accountable and how you're grading for them to be kept organized. I think that it really helps them just be better prepared. If you are organized, you will use your time more wisely, better, and just manage and get through class a lot better. So yeah. I do really like that.
Yeah, and our private program right now is at a starting point. It will continue to grow, and I think it's going to, I'm very proud of where we are, but it will continue to grow. So next, I just wanted to mention a couple of things facilities related. One is that, dating back to prior conversations, dating back to last year, our intent and working with BSA, Mr. De Leon, we're looking to engage in a master planning process, and specifically on infrastructure, right? That's something that was brought up some time ago. So this will be a little different in that it won't be necessarily as forward facing. We've got a very finite number of funds, and we've got to really analyze what the need happens to be across the entire physical property. So with that, it'll establish not only a priority list for Measure O, but really just broadly for years to come. That's the idea. So we're going to be looking at those medium to long range priorities. And we've talked preliminarily about putting out an RFP, or request for proposal, that would then, bring back for board approval. I'm excited to have this. It's a very unglamorous process, but it's about as foundational as it gets, because you want to use these funds, and we have been using them very purposefully, but now we want to see, let's take stock of where we are in order to make some very smart and purposeful decisions moving forward. And in terms of routine maintenance, we're going to continue to prioritize certain areas. We've talked in prior meetings about things that provide two things, beautification, but also shore up, facilities that's been around serving the community for over 80 years. And whatever requires us to do both, that's where we're going to target. And these are projects that are just smaller in scale, if you will, but that are very important to making sure that our campus continues to look and feel right. And obviously, a big driver for that is safety. So if there's something safety related, it's going to have to get addressed, as we engage in this broader process. So I just wanted to make mention of that and know and preview that this is going to be coming here in the next several meetings. Okay. And lastly, we have attendance, not a big sample size, but important nevertheless. Our goal continues to be 95% and above. I think that is a more than fair percentage. I'd like to see us be above that, but for the time being, that's our goal. So just for the short month of August, probably the better slide, you see there, where we're landing, a very positive start to our year. And just know that this will continue to be an area of focus for us because it has to be. And so ultimately, we are committed to that and committed to working with families, educating families about our process, and making sure that kids are here, because it's such a critical step to ensuring that we have success. Lastly, upcoming events, just some upcoming events to note. As I mentioned, back to school night, next Friday through Sunday is our See Me overnight trip for grade 7. Picture day is the 16th. I know that there may have been some confusion about that because we switched vendors, and unfortunately that's something that, anyway, it just created confusion, as I come to understand. Yes, this is for all grades. Yes, this is the entire school on the 16th, picture day. So our prior vendor may have reached out to families inadvertently, and so we're trying to dial that back.
Just with respect to picture day, just make sure Ms. Buchanan works out the yearbook rights to the photos, digital rights.
Yeah, that's one of the many reasons we decided to move in a different direction when it came to our vendors. So I think it'll be a promising partnership, but we unfortunately got some messaging mixed up there. But yes, I'll keep that in mind as far as yearbook being a big part of that. And then we do have our carnival coming up Friday, October 20th. That's been messaged, and we'll continue to work with our staff and our community on that. And then Wednesday through Friday, November 1st through the 3rd, is our Pali overnight trip for our grade 6. And again, not an exhaustive list, but it is a set of important events. And that will conclude my superintendent's report.
I'm just going to put a plug out there, because for back to school night for junior high, there was definitely a buzz in the air about carnival. Teachers were talking about it. Parents were signing up to volunteer about it. So I, hope that buzz continues this week as well with all of the elementary kids. It was great to hear the teachers talking about it, the teachers willing to volunteer at the event, all of that kind of thing. It shows community. So I love to hear it. It's coming up very soon. So we just can't wait to see, staff and families at the event.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that report, Dr. Ramirez. Moving on to board members' reports and communications. Do any board members have any correspondence to share? Right, and what about board members' reports and communications? None. Board members' interests and concerns?
They can be either communications or concerns, either one. I had a conversation with Dr. Ramirez with regards to the CAS, and I think that overall, I've not had an opportunity to look at the data. I've seen the data for the school, but not as related to Ventura County schools or to the state. But seeing those in years past, it seemed to me that similar types of numbers, but we're above average when compared to the state. And one of my concerns is there anything that we as a board can do to help or communicate with CSBA and or the CDE to be able to figure out, because it seems like the goalposts on these tests are constantly in movement, constantly changing, and therefore there's these numbers, having them have some significant meaning to us is a challenge. And I voiced a concern about what's the message when such a large percentage is not meeting or exceeding the standard, and what does that, what's being signaled to the students? Are they really underperforming, or is this test demanding much more? Are we not teaching to there? But my concern is, what can we do as a board to support the students and the teachers to be able to help our students to grow and develop? Because I know that they're good, but I don't know if the test is out of whack, and they seem to be constantly tweaking the test to see, because they're learning things about it. And somewhere, we've got to find some stability there so that we can help our students.
We have that item further into the agenda. Do you want to address that now, or should we just wait until
we can wait till then?
Okay, then I'd like to put in my interest, hopefully all of us, this Saturday across the whole entire state is the beach cleanup. And Mesa will be participating in that at the Ventura Harbor Cove. And that's from 9 to noon. So if any of our community members want to join, we will be there. The Drydens will definitely be there. And I know several staff that I saw at Back to School Night will also be there. So it's just making sure that that's getting messaged out. I saw it on Parent Square today, I think. So I know that our community was at least invited. And I want to throw out again, do we want to participate in the Camarillo Christmas Parade or any of the other local Christmas parades as a school? Because then we should be discussing that really soon. Ventura Harbor Cove. So they're at the harbor.
Yeah.
All the way at the end of the road. There's a parking lot right at the end. That's where we'll be. I'll have a table. I'll make a poster.
The Romeros will be there too. So we will be there as soon as we can, and we'll be there for as long as we can. But we are looking forward to participating. I'm sorry? 9 o'clock, from 9 to 12.
And it usually doesn't last till 12, but we start at noon.
Moving on. I'm sorry?
I'm going to echo what Jamie says. I would like to see us in the Camarillo Christmas Parade. I support that.
Sorry, Nina.
All right. Anything further? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Any discussion?
My only discussion, and it doesn't have to be answered in this, is I noticed that we did have some pretty high Edison bills. So I'm interested to see how like this summer compared to last summer. Or current compares to last. You're giving me a funny look. Edison was over $60,000.
There's a reason.
Yeah, so I was like, whoa, this is a lot.
Well, there was another one, again, don't have to answer, it had a credit. It was the AMS.net. And so there was a big bill, but then there was also a big credit. So I didn't know if there was a story there. If it's easy to answer now, feel free. If not,
Yeah,
I was just curious.
it's actually a very easy explanation and a very favorable one. So the total sum is the cost of wireless access points. That we're replacing, the plan is before end of year, replacing all the wireless access points. Most all of these, in fact, all of them are 10 years or older. So the total cost is about 50,000 for just the material, just the wireless access points. That is part of an E-rate project, which covers 70% of the cost. So if you do the math, our portion of that is 30%. And so that's why you see it effectively as a credit. And so the PO is for the full amount, but the true cost of the district is 30% of that total cost.
The school accounting manual, we have to recognize the full cost of the expense, and then whatever funding offset that we receive, we recognize that as revenue. So before we used to abate expenditures with E-rate, and they came out several years ago and said we could no longer do that, and so now we recognize the full cost and then have a revenue credit, which is the offset.
Anything further on the consent agenda? All right, all in favor?
Okay.
Motion carries 5-0. And just for the record, Dr. Canby is here now. Welcome. Okay, moving on to, let's see, information, the cast and the cast results.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Romero. So I wanted to just preface this presentation, a couple of points. Number one, assessment results are always a snapshot of learning. And in this instance, it's what allows us to be able to weigh so many of the decisions that we make around programs, around students, and this is certainly an important component of that. That said, it is not the entirety of what we use to weigh. Second thing is, at the risk of sounding like a broken record about such things, I still have to highlight that and continue to cite the long-term impact of the pandemic on student learning. That is very real, and it is something that those of us who've been educating and working around kids for an extended period of time can readily understand and identify. And that has had an impact on a variety of levels, not the least of which is learning. I'm just going to state that and move on. Beyond that, I just want to make mention that, we have focused a lot of our efforts, particularly around these initiatives, as part of our LCAP. We have focused on a very specific number of goals and a very specific number of actions. And the reason I bring that up now is because some of these actions have only been recent and have not yet had a full opportunity to come together and to bear out the results that we believe they will. And there's always a concern, for me at least, about overextending ourselves and moving in a direction where there's a lot of good intentionality and good intent, but that we risk overextending ourselves and then winding up with more programs or actions that we can readily sustain. And beyond that, it's good that Mr. Sullivan cited a conversation that we had just this Saturday, as we were just talking about a couple of things, but CASP being the primary one. And he just asked me a very profound and important question: is what can the board do? What can the board do to support? And when he asked me that, the first thing that came to mind was funding to be able to sustain these programs. And I don't mean funding in terms of the funding that we'll talk about entirely later. I'm talking about the advocacy for that funding. Let me explain very briefly. Many of the programs that we've been able to put in place have been reliant upon funds that will expire sooner than later. They're not sustainable for a longer period of time. And those of us, like I said, that have been working in schools for an extended period of time know that the effects of disruption to schooling, those will linger with our students for an extended period of time. So to me, there's a disconnect between the amount of funding and the length of that funding versus the real day-to-day need. And we've been very strategic, extremely strategic with those funds, as well with other funds. But I guess if I had to invite the board to take, stock, is how can individually and collectively you make those amplify those voices out there amongst boards and amongst the community that are signaling to the state, and primarily to the state, but legislators, to say we have to continue some way of making these funds available for a longer period of time, or at least there be funds available to onboard programs and sustain them. And we're going to talk about, some of those key programs here at Mesa. So with that said, I want to move into the results. The results that you see here for 21-22 are a snapshot of what was already publicly reported. This was publicly reported last year, right? And that's just context. Next, we're going to go into assessing results that have not been publicly reported, or at least not yet. They will soon. But these are our assessment data points and sets from last year. Please keep in mind that the tested grades or the assessed grades are grades 3 through 8. And so let me just speak on this particular slide here. In ELA, you see grade 3 through 8, and this is just the percentage of students who met or exceeded. There are 4 levels. Levels 1, 2 are does not meet or nearly meets, and 3 and 4 are standard met or exceeded. And so these percentages represent the total number of students. There is a hyperlink within these, which I won't necessarily go into at the moment, but it is available if the board wishes to see a complete set of percentages within each grade level band. Math, you see the numbers there, and those are again for grades. I'm sorry, for levels 3 and 4 across the continuum, with the all grades approximation being percentages that are indicated as overall. Science is not assessed every year. Science is assessed for us in 5th and 8th, which is why you see the results there. And I won't, I will wait on my overall analysis for a little later in this presentation. But obviously, with this. It gives you a snapshot view. There is an additional slide, which I think is important to take a look at. And this is a little bit of a different take on the results. In the first band, or in the first row, you see ELA, and that's year to year. In other words, last year's third grade compared to, 2 years ago, the third grade compared to last year's third grade. So that is a different group of students, okay? And you see there, year to year, the shifts and the changes that happened from one third grade class to a different third grade class, from one fourth and fifth grade class to a different fourth and fifth grade class. Below it, there's another way of looking at this, which is by cohort. In other words, the third graders of a year prior to the fourth grade of a year later, right? So there's two ways that we're looking at this, year to year and by cohort. And you see there that wherever you see a dash, that means that the results were consistent with the year prior. Same thing with math below. You see the year to year, third grade through eighth, and then overall, and in math. Not to bury the lead, the overall are at best flat, at worst a slight decline of 1 or 4%, depending on the content area. And so before I go into any analysis, I'll entertain any questions, clarifying questions from the board this time.
I have a question. Why did we score higher last year, in 2021?
Can you clarify?
If I remember correctly, the scores for the prior school year,
Correct.
prior to this one, were higher.
They were.
Why?
That's going to be the focal point of this entire presentation. And why did we? There's a bunch of theories that I can have about that, but the truth is they're different cohorts. There's different students entirely, right? The eighth graders from 2 years ago moved on. There's a new crop of second graders who became third graders. So already there's 2 grade levels that are very different, one from the other. And you know, some of the reasons why I think are part of where I want to take our conversation for sure.
And how much time do students preparing for the CASP and the CAST prior to taking?
So what I can tell you about that is, in terms of just the test taking, if you will, students see that depending on the grade level several times over. In the past several years, they spend, let's talk about the lead up to the assessment. The lead up to the assessment, there's a significant amount of exposure that teachers provide just to being able to know how to undertake the test itself, right? How to be able to use the computer, how to be able to use the interface, because it's a very specific portal. And then throughout the year, in grades 3 and up, there are in this past years, we've had interim assessment blocks, which are taken on the actual site, if you will, that the regular CASP is taken on. So in terms of exposure to just the mechanics of taking the test, there is, I would say, a fair amount of effort that teachers have undertaken at every grade level to be able to expose kids and make them comfortable with being able to take, you know, an online assessment.
And do you know how much time is spent going over the scoring and the rubrics that CASP uses to score the students?
I wouldn't be able to cite you something concrete. I can tell you that teachers are very well aware of the kind of rubrics that are utilized. We discuss them as a staff, and it's something that particularly because our teachers are very, on the whole, very seasoned, there's a lot of understanding. The extent to which that translates to students, that I can't tell you. I can't tell you with certainty. how much time is spent on those tasks.
And you mentioned that there's sometimes funding that is used for programs to help us with CAST and CAST. What type of programs are these?
So let me back up for a moment. I want to draw a distinction, and it's just an important one to draw. A student's ability, or any person's ability, to take a test is one part of this, right? Their ability to handle a mouse, to be able to do the trackpad, to be able to just know how to address the test itself. It certainly requires practice, and it's part of what we see. The other more challenging part of it is, can they actually handle the tasks that are put in front of them? And that's where, to be quite frank, we spent the majority of our time, is in helping students understand that no matter what problem, because we don't know what problems they're going to see. We don't know what they'll look like. We don't know how many they'll receive, because it's all dynamic. It's all completely personalized to the student. In a classroom, there might be 20 different versions of the same test. So I just want to draw a distinction, because the test type is one thing, but being able to do it in terms of your understanding, being able to do it in terms of your literacy skills, your mathematical knowledge, that is where we've spent the bulk of our time. And that's the kind of programming that I'm referring to, that I'll point to in a minute, that is intended to support us when it comes to performance on this assessment. Does that make sense? So I'll unpack that a little more, but it's important to draw a distinction, because a kiddo can be extremely proficient on a device and not necessarily do well on the test, and vice versa. We have many students who may not be technologically advanced, but because they're more than capable and because they're more than prepared in other ways, do exceptionally well. Okay, so I do want to clarify just whatever questions are just about the data sets, and I want to start that conversation around what our plans have been and will continue to be, and where we're making adjustments to try to bolster our performance, not just in this assessment, but just in terms of learning overall.
As we get closer, I would like to know how the students are being prepared to handle a task relating to whether it's ELA, mathematics, science, to help them score higher, because I think that a lot of the kids that fell within the level 2 could probably fall within the level 3. If we spend the right amount of time and we are effective in teaching them or giving them a plan on how to attack these tests, because they're very challenging, and I've seen a lot of them, and they're difficult.
Sure.
They're hard.
Yes, they're complex.
So we need to prepare them for that, so that they are more confident and do better.
Sure.
And so on that note, because I hadn't noticed there was this before, the hyperlinks compare like 2022 versus 2023.
Yes.
Which is really interesting to see, especially if you look at each grade, they're very similar from one to the next. And so I just want to confirm, because I think this to be the case, but that each grade level, staff are meeting with each other to figure out the color coding, the exceeded, met, didn't meet, and then try to see how can we move the scale.
Yes.
Because
so
they're very similar, which means we should change something.
Yes. So let me capitalize on that. I was going to wait for this a little later, but let me just make one point about the test. The test, this particular test, and the one that was utilized last year, so the last 2 years post-pandemic, have been modified. And let me tell you what that means. In prior iterations before the pandemic, we received what it was called claim level data. For us as educators, that claim level data was infinitely more useful in seeing trends. Right now, unfortunately, and this is just my commentary on this, we receive a scaled score. So we know what the number is. We just don't have a lot of information behind that number in terms of what specific areas, concepts exactly. And that is putting us in a very frustrating part, because we know the overall number, but two numbers won't match. The reasons why they got to those numbers won't match. And that data, absent that data, it leaves us with many, many questions that I know that's been a point of frustration with the staff. And we know why it's happening, because it's the state's response to learning overall. But it's just putting us in a very difficult position to be able to peel back those layers as professionals and say, here are the specific concepts that students did well on or underperformed. And I think that's a missing piece that will come, but it's not there now. And so I think that's what you're alluding to something that's more actionable for our teachers and our staff. And so absent that information, we are having to rely on our local interpretations and local data, which we're going to get to in a moment.
Sorry.
Yes. And I just want to highlight some pieces there. But here's what I can say, and I think I can say this about our staff. None of us are comfortable with these results. It's to a person, everybody is working hard. And as I told them, at this point where we are, it's not that at all that's in question. It's not our effort that's in question, but our effort is not matching our desired results. And so now the hard part is, how do we better align our efforts? How do we act more strategically in order to start to impact those results more readily? And I think that's where we find ourselves right now.
And the difference between CAS, and STAR is that CAS is so much more comprehensive.
Correct.
It's such a much objective, better results for us to understand really how are they doing. And so I put weight on CAS and CAS more than I do to STAR. And another thing with CAS and CAS is that they're public record. So it is, anybody can compare us locally, statewide, and it impacts the ranking.
Sure.
And so that's another thing that we need to consider. So hopefully, there's a way for us to, a reasonable way for us to be able to help these kids feel more comfortable.
Well, let me go on that question. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So ultimately, I knew that what we needed to do was have a conversation about what do we have underway and what do we have already that's proven to bear out results. So that's what I want to discuss now. You've seen this graphic before. Ultimately, what we want to do is align our plans, align our resources, because we don't want to be disparate. We don't want to be incoherent. We don't want to be chasing after one thing and the next. We want to be very targeted. So we continue to use the LCAP as a way to bring life to the framework for the future and the learner profile. Now, let me be very specific. In Goal 1, here are the broad highlights of what's in store for Goal 1. We want high academic achievement through rigorous experiences for students. I want to zero in on two and hone in on two specific things: the learning progressions and the work around early childhood education. We've talked about the after-school programming, and we're going to have a lighter conversation on instructional materials embedded in this. Next slide, please. What you see here is the preliminary results. There is no equivalent of standardized testing for the lower. So in grades TK 1, 2, TK, K1 and 2, there is no standardized testing equivalent. So this is something that we have talked about now since I've been on board. And you've heard me now talk about this for several years. Well, here are some of the results that we are now seeing, okay? And yes, I agree with you, STAR isn't the end all be all, but it is a marker, and it is one that we can use to start to determine where things are trending. So I want to show this because there's two different assessments embedded here. And I'm excited about this because I think it's a demonstration of what can happen when we really focus and hone in our attention. So if you take a look, you read it from left to right as you face your screen, grade TK all the way out to grade 2. The numbers in parentheses represent the number of students within each group, okay? And within each assessment. There's two primary assessments. There's others, but two that we're using in early grades. One is STAR, and its equivalent is STAR Early Literacy, and the Sunday pre-post. So if you take a look at this just holistically, you're starting to see a very promising upswing of performance from our youngest learners. Now, these are all more or less end of year data points, okay? So if you look at our grade TK, 71% of our students of the 28 were in that at or above band. In K, 91%. That's in the STAR Early Literacy. 5 of those already were able to take the STAR Reading, which is a more robust, or at least a more heavier assessment. By the time you get to grade 1 and 2, you see the numbers there. The numbers in comparison to prior years are trending more positively. Next slide, please. This is another separate evaluation system or assessment. A slightly different bands, but you see there, in this case, students are given both. Of the 28 TKs, we had this year's TKs. Last year's TKs. We have 28, 79 exceeded the standard, 7 met. 44 students in K, 84 and 14. Now, why did this happen? Why did this occur? It occurred because there was very, very specific focus on staffing. We staffed a learning support specialist. We really focused on strong collaboration among grade levels, TK1. We focused on learning progressions, and I'll get to that in a moment. We onboarded new materials to supplement the existing materials that we had. And we focused on paraprofessional training alongside that, as well as a reorientation of our time. So our entire morning block became different. We utilized time differently. And what we're starting to see is a different set of results, right? But bear in mind that this work that you see here that yielded these results in 2023 started in 2021, started in the fall of 2021. So it is something that has been ongoing, but we focused on it over an extended period of time. And it's why we're seeing the results from the lower grades that we're seeing. Very promising, very, very enthusiastic, for me to see these results, because it demonstrates that when we focus and we're very strategic and purposeful, that we see the kinds of results that we ultimately want to see. And why early childhood? Because we know that kids come to us with very different learning experiences at the age of 4. Some have gone to preschool, some have not. Some have had different experiences in life that have accelerated their learning, even at that age. Others have not. And what we want to do is, if there's a gap already, to bridge it as much as we can so that it doesn't exacerbate as the years go on. So this was something that the board has heard me talk about now for several years, and I just wanted to share some of those preliminary results.
Well, these results are very promising and very encouraging. That's great that we have these, and hopefully that carries over. The second graders are now in 3rd grade. Hopefully it does, carry over to that, and we see positive results. So, I'm just thankful that we have such great teachers, excellent teachers here at Mesa, they're very hardworking, and I'm very confident that they're going to be willing to, take that extra step to help them.
And they have been, and I think that's what's yielding, just a lot of confidence, a renewed sense of confidence. And, I can go on and on, but I'll leave it there and certainly answer any questions that the board may have.
I guess I'm wondering, we do STAR testing in every grade.
Right.
So are other grade levels looking at their data as well?
They are. And right now we just concluded what we consider the beginning of year. And to that end, let me go ahead and dovetail into this conversation, which is another very big initiative for us, which is documenting all of our learning progressions. I won't get into the weeds on this because this can go deep. Suffice it to say that we have developed frameworks with our staff This has been hard work, very arduous, detailed, task-oriented work dating back to last spring. And it's to clearly define learning expectations, clearly define learnings as they should be, as we intend them to be over the course of the entire year. On average, we have anywhere between 800 to 900 hours with kids when you count up all the minutes that we have in instructional minutes. Our goal is to squeeze as much life and purpose out of each and every one of those minutes, bell to bell. And we have got many competing interests and ideas. We want to make things engaging for kids. We don't want to drown out joy and enthusiasm, but we also want to be very purposeful with the time. And so the reason for this is to memorialize and document exactly how learnings ought to be. We started with ELA and math, which are really those anchor content areas. And within that, there's been very intentional, purposeful, and strategic planning with a particular focus in TK4 on writing and in 5 through 8 on AVID, right? Which also has components of literacy, such as the note-taking and other components that teachers are bringing into it. We're taking this plan, do, study, act cycle and dividing it into 4 quarters. That's not new. What we're doing is doing it more purposefully, more intentionally. The collaboration is happening now, not only on Wednesday's early release, but week to week. So that question about what data sets are teachers seeing? Yes, STAR. But that's not the only thing they see. They're also seeing what kids produce. They're also seeing what kids can create, what kids can write. They're looking at many different streams of information. In fact, that is even a focal point for our collaboration coming up with our AVID initiative. Let's bring demonstrations of solid note-taking and understand, because note-taking is really not just about writing. It's about comprehension. It's about analysis. It's about literacy. And all of it is documented through those notes. So those are samples that we've committed to. So just to give you an idea, those weekly PLC grade level meetings are going to be and have already been foundational to making sure that we don't let a lot of time slip between discussions and plans and goal setting. And the last thing that I'll say about these might seem like very matter of fact or very straightforward, but they really have been a lot of arduous work with our staff. And so I'm very proud of them. And I think that we're going to see some significant results this year.
Yeah. And going back to the writing, I know at least in the 6th grade level in mathematics, the students have been required to write out their mathematic answers, so that it's not just a number, it's an analysis, including with the final number, which is great because from what I remember in the CAF relating to mathematics, it required students to write a plan, not just the final number, but a plan. So I think that is going hand in hand with it. And that's hopefully we see more of that.
Yes, we will. And that's where we're going to be more task oriented. That's the goal. Everybody is in a bit of a different space on that, but we want to make sure that the assessment isn't the first time that kids see that level of rigor and cognitive demand. And that is something that our staff has been grappling with, myself included, with how do we present things in ways that kids can access, but that exposes them to not just what that assessment will do, but just really the standards of the grade level and the expectations of the grade level. So, these other goals are all intended to tell you we weren't waiting on standardized testing to tell us that we needed to put things in place. The standardized testing in some ways validates our decisions, but many of these initiatives are very, very recent. Let me give you a case in point. Staffing counseling, the staffing of a counselor position. That's something that only came together, over this summer. And Miss Inda has been a good addition to our staff already, has spent the first part of the year getting to know students individually, which I think is a great initiative. Supporting in as part of a team, call it our mental health team, and And we're looking to be, again, very, very strategic with her time and with her efforts as well. And then, of course, we have the implementation of Avid, which is right now the beginning of the year, but that we hope will continue to build as the year goes on and as we talk about the future. Thanks. I just wanted to make mention of the fact that we do have other staff related to this. And, you know, we talk about learning, but we also know that kids need a lot of other supports, and either seasonal or more longer standing. And so I just wanted to share that these these services exist for our kids, and that week to week, we've been meeting every week with this team of psychologists, counselors, to look at our caseload and make smart decisions around what's needed. And then lastly, one piece that I'll say is we need to develop, or we are developing our scorecard, and we've got a couple of committees, staff-led, that are going to bring a lot more clarity to some things. And you know, what does behavior have to do with academic performance? Well, we need kids to be regulated. We need them to be task-oriented. We need them to be respectful and kind with one another. And these are all important features that are going to be very important to maintaining the kind of culture that we want, the kind of culture that's conducive to actual success when it comes to the metrics that we're pursuing. So to me, those are just components of a well-run program that we don't want to ignore and you know, leave aside. One last point. You asked me a question about funding. I won't go into the details, but some of this funding, whether it's positions or program related, are attributed to funds that will expire in the next year or two at most. And we have been working hard to figure out what's sustainable for us, but we know that we just want to be smart. And I know that we need time. And so we're in this point of tension, needing more time for programs to develop and having a finite number of resources that are dwindling. And so that's why you heard me bring up funding as being a major source of emphasis. Yeah.
Well, if I could real quickly, along the funding piece, you know, we're going to get what we get. I think this is where we need to collaborate with other school districts within the county and join our voices together and use our CSBA delegates, you know, to go to the state and saying this is what we need in order to be successful. And we need to be collaborating with the other school districts.
Another comment, not so much related to this, but somewhat connected. In the past, prior to you becoming the superintendent, we had this AR program where students were awarded or recognized for earning AR points. And recently, parents have asked, you know, can we bring it back? And I do think it's a great incentive for them to read and take AR tests, AR quizzes, reading quizzes, and it helps them prepare just in general for any test that they take in any class. So if possible, consider bringing that back.
Some teachers still do that actively.
Yes.
That's a teacher choice.
Correct. And that is something that actually came up during our last leadership team meeting. And so I do know that there are plenty of teachers who do move forward with that and have moved forward with it. That said, we left it at having a broader conversation about how to make that more widespread. And so more to come on that.
So, and my question regarding the scorecard is just to make sure that we have a committee that is a large range in terms of grades and ways to look at that, because since the scorecard is going to be for our entire community, we would want to make sure that it's not only something that affects junior high or that it affects elementary, but that our committee that's working on that scorecard is being flexible, because I don't think the scorecard will necessarily be the same for every grade at the school, or I'm not anticipating potentially that it's the same. So I want to make sure that, you know, and mentally I'm allowing that flexibility. So I would assume you're kind of doing that as well, because they will all have different standards. They will all have different tests they take. They all have different things, right? So I guess I'm expecting, maybe I'm not, you know, but I'm expecting flexibility. So I don't know if every grade will be the same or not, but I'm already imagining that it's not.
There will be certain things that will measure. Yes, there will be categories and kind of placeholders. So that's kind of where we're going to do this loose tight situation. Mhm.
All right, we did spend a lot of time on this topic, but I think it was well spent, time well spent. We're going to move on to the Golden Valley Charter School unaudited actuals.
This is just an item for information purposes. I'd like to just sunshine it here and then put it at a future agenda as having been received by the board.
Okay.
And that'll be the action component of this.
All right, so we'll move on. It's public hearing. We have a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open it up for at what time? 7:50. Wait a couple minutes and see if anybody has any comments, questions. We'd love to hear from anybody.
Ms. Romero, there's no,
okay.
so we
So
can
just
go
move
ahead and
on.
close.
So, okay, so then we'll go ahead and close it. You know, I just have a quick question on this. Has anybody indicated, any student indicated that they don't have the materials necessary to, for any of their classes? Nope. Okay. All right, it's 7:51, 52, closing it at 7:52. And I'll move on to the next item. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the renewal terms of the superintendent's employment contract for the period of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026?
I move that we approve the renewal of the superintendent's employment contract for the period specified.
All right, any discussion?
Well, I second.
I'm sorry. Okay, any discussion? All right, I'd just like to say thank you very much, Dr. Ramirez. You have been working very hard. It shows, and we appreciate your hard work and your commitment to the district. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor to serve in this role, and look forward to the future.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries 5-0. No opposition. Moving on to the, is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the 2022-2023 unaudited actuals?
Motion to consider the approval of 2022-2023 unaudited actuals.
I will second.
All right, any discussion?
Any presentation?
Presentation?
$549 students were enrolled on October 5th, 2022. That's Fall Census Day. Every year we measure the enrollment on the first Wednesday of the year. P2 ADA was 517.01. Unduplicated pupil count was 222, and those are your grade reduced lunch, foster youth, and English language learners. So we had a 3-year rolling average of 40.35%. Funded ADA was 575.35. And one thing I would like the board to take note of, as you recall, last spring, Mesa really began focusing on attendance percentages. And normally after P2, we see a drop at attendance, and we actually saw growth. Annual ADA was 523.83. So almost a little over or almost 788, which is a significant shift. So hopefully we can carry that momentum into the current year. Cost of living adjustment and augmentation was 13.26%. And the district had revenues of about 9.5 million and expenditures, including transfers, out of almost 8.85 million. One of the reasons why there's such a significant difference between revenue and expenditures is, as you recall, there were 2 discretionary block grants awarded last year. There was some uncertainty around the art, music, and instructional materials block grant. And so Mesa opted not to spend or develop a plan in relationship to those monies, as in the January budget proposal, the governor was threatening to take half. And then at May revise, he reaffirmed his intent, and the legislature responded, and we actually saw just a reduction of about 6%. So all good news for Mesa, because those monies now carrying into the current fiscal year. And Dr. Ramirez and I will begin to work on developing a plan so that we can bring it back to the board's approval, as we do have to have a plan prior to expending those funds. Also, there was the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. That was another fund that may revise that the governor threatened to take a large portion of, and we only saw a reduction of about 14 to 16%. So again, good news for Mesa, as we're using those monies to provide RTI support services in the district. When we look at your general fund revenue, it's interesting to look back over the last few years, because at one point LCFF funding was about 75 to 80%, and you can see it's dropped to 65%. But the other state revenue was about 18%, and that was previously about 5 to 7%. Again, it's because of those 2 categorical block grants. When LCFF was first proposed and implemented, the intent was that all monies would siphon through LCFF, and then the local board would make decisions regarding that. But because we now, with term limits, most of the legislators worked around when LCFF was implemented, so we're seeing a return of categorical funds. And also Governor Newsom isn't as tied to LCFF funding as Governor Brown was. Governor Brown was a huge proponent of local control, and in recent years we've seen a greater shift back to the state controlling how those monies will be spent. Federal revenue is about 5%. Mesa has now expended all of its ESSER monies. So those, as Dr. Ramirez noted, were of tremendous support in recovery from COVID, but those monies have now been expended. ESSER $2 we had to spend by September 30th of this year. We have done that, and in addition, we've expended all of your ESSER 3. So as moving forward, we will look to leverage current categorical funds. When we look at your expenditures, about 39% of your expenditures were on certificated salaries, another 13% on classified salaries, and then employee benefits constitute about 19% of all the expenditures by the expenditures of the district. Books and supplies were about 3%. Operating expenditures were about 1.4 million. That includes utilities, any of your agreements. We contract with the county for psych services, counseling services, so those would fall within those object codes. We had other outgo of about $737,000. A large portion of that are those monies that we transferred to Golden Valley for their special ed portion. It comes to Mesa, and then we transfer it to Golden Valley. And then we also had expenditures for excess costs for preschool students as we closed out the year. And then we also transferred out $200,000, $100,000 to the Pupil Transportation Fund in preparation to purchase the electric buses. Well, that grant is happening very quickly, and we're now just waiting for potential delivery dates for those buses. And then we also transferred $100,000 to deferred maintenance, planning for future needs of the district as relates to long-term maintenance needs. When we look at the general fund ending fund balance, we started the year with 1.7 million, and we're actually ending the year with 1.5 million. We, again, $200,000 of that was transferred to other funds. When we look at your restricted, we started out with $480,000, and we're ending with about 1.3 million. And again, you can see the various grants where we have carryover monies. Part of it, we have some kitchen infrastructure grant monies that we're planning and spending. And then we also have learning recovery emergency grant monies. We have some ELOP money and then ELOG money that there's just a small amount carried over, and then student activity funds and other locally restricted. When we compare the current 22-23 to the prior year, you can see that we did have some growth with LCFF, and even though it was augmented by 13.26%, we only saw growth of about 9.44%, and that's because of declining enrollment. Federal revenue, you can see the drop off because of in 21-22, we made a push to spend down some of those federal monies, planning for the requirement to expend those by this September 30th. And then other state revenue, you can see it grew by almost 70%. And then other local revenues declined slightly. Certificated salaries were up, but again, as you recall, we had a significant settlement, a TA, classified salaries as well. And we saw some growth in classified salaries because of additional needs in the classroom. TK classrooms now require 2 adults for every 2 adults for 24 students, and next year it will reduce to 20 students. Although this in the current year, if we have any early start students, then we're required to have a 1-to-10 ratio. But I don't believe Mesa has any what they're calling early start, and those are those students who turn 5, and this was something the legislature threw into the budget at the very last minute, is that they have to be 5 prior to June 2nd. If they turn 5 after June 2nd, they're considered early start. Employee benefits are up by about 17%, and then books and supplies dropped slightly, and then service and other operating expenditures remained fairly flat. And then other outgo did go up, and that again, as I mentioned, we did have excess costs for a few special education students, and so that's reflected in other outgo. We transferred the 200,000, so again, we're ending with an unassigned, unappropriated ending fund balance of $1,059,000, which is down by about $200,000 from the previous year. When we do look at other funds, cafeteria fund continues to do well. We're looking to ways to spend down our reserves. We can only have 6 months of working capital on hand, and so we'll be looking at that. Deferred maintenance, that balance has grown to $712,000, again, which will be very helpful for long-term maintenance needs of Mesa. The People Transportation Fund grew to $156,000, which puts us in a very good place and as we acquire those 2 electric buses. Special reserve funds were fairly flat. And then in the building fund, we did expend about $3 million, and that was to finish up the HVAC windows projects. So we have a remaining balance of about $3.4 million. And you can see we did have revenues of $109,000. Those revenues are reflective of the increase in interest rate. Interest rates went from being less than 1 to well over 4%. So the district, because of its cash reserves, did benefit not only in the building fund, but also in the general fund. Capital facilities developer fees, we have $106,000. Those monies can only be used for growth. And then in the county schools facility hardship, that money is just holding there for potential future needs, $57,000. And then bond interest and redemption fund, those are monies that are allocated for the debt service on the bonds. So all in all, the district ended, what I feel is on a high note for the year. Even though we did have some deficit spending, we were able to fund pupil transportation fund and the deferred maintenance. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much. It looks very healthy, so that's a good news. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Alrighty. Then moving on. Let's see, where am I? Yes. Okay. So now, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. No opposition. And is there a motion for the consideration of adoption of resolution 23-2401, GAN limit?
Make a motion for the consideration and adoption of resolution 23-24-01 regarding the GAN limit.
I second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of the use of the 2023-2024 Proposition 30 Education Protection Account funds?
I move that we the 2023-2024 Proposition 30.
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess I was just hoping for some clarity because there's quite a big difference between 2022-23 actuals and 2023-24 budgeted.
What is the difference? Actually went into, they were approved by the voters back in 2012. And then in 2018, it was supposed to be for a very brief time that the highest taxpayers in the state would be taxed at a higher rate. It was to sunset, and it was also a sales tax. The sales tax sunset, voters in 2018 voted to extend that for an additional 12 years. We are required to use this for instructional salaries. Specific functions are allowable, so we just make a transfer at the end of the year. 4 times a year, the state benchmarks those monies based upon projected ADA rates as well as the amount of revenue collected. So there's a large swing. And actually last year in 22-23, we saw the lowest percentage than we have in all of the years that Prop 30 had been in existence. So every year it swings. When you look at prior years, they were at 75%. It will depend on revenue collection in the current year as to how much monies we receive. It doesn't change the amount of revenue this district receives. It's part of LCFF. We receive property taxes and state aid. Those are the 2 components that make up LCFF. And as part of state aid are the EPA funds. So whatever we don't receive in EPA, the state uses other funds to make up the difference. So that's why we see this continual swing. And at first interim, the amount's different. At second interim, the amount's different. At estimated actuals, the amount's different. And it's not actually until we close the books that we have some idea. But then when they re-benchmark it annual, they revise even what we received in the prior year. So that's why we do, it's normal to see those swings from year to year, but it doesn't impact the total amount that we receive.
All right. Anything further? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. No opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the new adult breakfast rate of $3.61, lunch $5.58, and snack $1.58 increase for the fiscal year 2023-2024? Is there a second? Is there a motion?
I'll motion for the approval of the new adult breakfast, lunch, and snack rates as listed for the year 2023-2024.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. 4-0. Jamie stepped out. Okay, moving on. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval and ratification of the invoices from Worthington Direct?
I move that we approve the and ratify the invoice from Worthington Direct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I just want to, I saw the chairs and I think they're pretty cool. So looking forward to having new chairs. And are we going to replace these two or is it?
Yes, so furniture is our next big undertaking, and classrooms are part of that. So yes, we're going to be looking to make gains on that this year and in the future.
What are you doing to these chairs? Where are you taking them?
They're probably going to be disposed of at this point. They've served their time. Some of these are breaking down at this point.
Okay.
What about the chairs from the lab? They'll get repurposed in the school?
The rolling chairs will get repurposed. Yes.
Yes, yeah, being in school, that was one of the needs that I heard is that the resource area.
Yes, so we will absolutely repurpose all of the chair and equipment that is still very useful, but the ones that have seen better days, they're going to find their way elsewhere.
Alrighty. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Did you vote, Jamie?
Of the STEAM lab furniture?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Motion carries 5-0. No opposition. All right. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval and ratification of the invoice from Snell Construction?
I move that we approve and ratify the invoices from Snell Construction for the exterior painting of the NPR building and paint stucco project.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of adoption of Resolution 23-2402, sufficiency of textbooks?
I'll make a motion for the adoption of the resolution 23-24-02, sufficiency of textbooks.
Any discussion?
I will second.
I'm sorry. Is there,
I will also, yeah,
Good discussion.
I just want to know where and when these were posted.
These were posted in September 1st, and there was a notice of public hearing that's posted 15 days, minimum of 15 days prior. We have our regular spots around campus as well as district and school websites.
anything further?
Does the website count as a place?
We count it as a place, but in addition to that, there's at least 3 physical locations about campus where those are posted.
Is there a concern, Jamie?
You have to post it in 3 separate places at least 10 days prior. So I'm making sure that we did that.
Oh,
Yes.
That's me.
And I have to give all the credit to Brianna, who is very, very timely with her publications of any public notice.
All righty, anything further?
So then how do we document that? Like if something that's audited, how do we document it?
Declaration.
It's mostly, well, we've had staff interviews around them.
But, you know, I think it's a very appropriate thing to ask when you're putting it on the agenda. It's just like when we approve the bell schedule. is to make sure that we have appropriate number of minutes and per day and per class.
Yeah, no, I think
That's just a
it's
part of our
yeah,
job
it's-
is to make
no,
sure that
it's-
we're doing things right, because if we don't, it gets undone.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I turned to Brianna because she's got the particulars and specifics, but I know we had talked about it in our meetings as well. So I'm very grateful for that, and we'll continue to stay in compliance.
Thank you, Brianna. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval of MOU with Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project?
I move to approve, can I do as amended? Are we gonna fix the typo?
It actually, it was already fixed. Yes.
I
Yeah.
I didn't check my emails
No,
today.
it's okay.
I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. It's okay. But yes, it was addressed. There was a typo that read 2023 and it was 2024.
Did you second the motion, Jamie?
No, she made the motion.
I'm sorry, did somebody?
No.
second it.
Okay. All righty. Okay,
So all the text is appropriate.
It lines up, yeah.
I'm sorry? Yeah, okay. So just for the record, the motion was made, it was second, now I'm gonna ask for a vote. All in favor?
All right.
Okay, motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Okay, is there a motion for the consideration of adoption of June 2023 board policy revisions for the sections listed, BP 0420.41 and BP 9322. Exhibit 1, 0420.41. Do I have a
I
motion?
move to approve the adoption of the June 2023 board policies as outlined.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Just for confirmation, these didn't appear to change anything that we are currently doing.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Alrighty, moving on. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the field trip request to the Moxie in Santa Barbara?
I move that we approve the field trip to the Moxie, the Book Museum and Exploration in Santa Barbara.
Any discussion?
Just that the funds will be supported through the PFO.
Okay. Anything further? Okay. Anything further? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the field trip request to UCLA?
I make a motion to approve the field trip request to UCLA for the Full Steam Ahead program.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
I'm going to insert it here. This discussion that I'm about to make also is regarding the previous field trip and the one that's about to come up. And we have this wonderful after-school program that we're talked about earlier in the meeting, that where it's appropriate and feasible, that we encourage the grade level after-school program teacher or to be able to attend these things, to be as one of the chaperones. That's my only, where it's appropriate, if we're going, so they're not missing their after-school program, but they're able to come in and take care of that thing, so that we can carry that excitement, enthusiasm, and momentum into the after-school program.
And I'd also, if we do have extra spaces on the bus, for example, for UCLA, are we able to open up to non-STEAM students?
I'm undecided because it's UCLA, but So
If it was USC.
I'm just saying, if it were
Sure.
USC, there'd probably be 2 buses. Yes, yes, additional slots will certainly be publicized to other students, not as part of the after school program.
Do you, do you know when this trip may take place?
October 28th.
The date is on the form itself, October 28th. It's on a Saturday. The cost is 0 because, well, there's fuel and transportation cost, and there's the actual event will be cost free, but yes, there are other ancillary costs related to transportation and staff.
And that's being shown through a grant,
Through the state grant.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of approval of the field trip request to the Pali Institute Outdoor Education?
I so move.
I'll gladly second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, in this authorization, I didn't see any costs associated with this one. I know that there is, and how is it being funded and that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is just a field trip request itself. The contract was approved already time ago by the board, but it's basically 3 sources of funding: parent donations, PFO, and district funds.
And I guess I want to give a huge shout out. I think it was CME, it wasn't Pali, but just to our community, because in addition to parents funding their own child on some of these trips, there was also large anonymous funds that were granted to PFO to support these programs because cost had increased. So I just wanted to give a huge thank you to whoever that anonymous donor is. It is greatly appreciated.
Absolutely, and echoed in kind. Absolutely.
Right.
I'll second that. And the other thing is just make sure that our students and parents are fully aware that, this is all inclusive. It's not exclusionary, and we want them to be there.
Anything further? Okay. Motion all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries 5-0, no opposition. Is there a motion for the consideration of the ratification of the FMLA leave request of employee number 415 effective September 4, 2023 through November 16, 2023?
I so move.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0, and there appears to be no items for future consideration. No?
No.
Okay. Okay. Future meetings, Tuesday, October 17th at 6 p.m. and
Monday.
And then Monday in November.
Yes, there was a change that happened because of a scheduling conflict with other districts and Ms. Peterson's ability to attend. That happened earlier in the year. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So, good idea. Thank you very much. So that is Monday, November 13th at 6 p.m. We adjourn at 8:24. Thank you very much.